Chapter 1 Twilight Investigates. It was no secret that Twilight Sparkle was curious. Everything new was an opportunity to expand her knowledge, and she always researched the latest discoveries in Equestria. Even if she was just out walking and heard something interesting, she would stop to listen and see what she could learn. So when Celestia quietly asked her to investigate a research company based out in the ocean near Manhattan, she was more than happy to do so. "Be careful," Celestia said, touching her shoulder to stop her from just immediately running off. "I have a bad feeling about this company." "Really?" Twilight asked, tilting her head. "But I've kept up with the Life Aura Research Center's work for years. They've done so much to advance health science in Equestria." "I know, but I have reason to believe their methods are unethical. I just can't prove it. I've visited many times, as has Luna. They always take us to certain areas that are clearly set up for our arrival, while saying the rest are off-limit. There's a threat of contamination. They don't want us getting sick, as they experiment with different biologicals. But something about their attitude while we're there. We're sure they're hiding something." "Well, I always believe you should trust your gut feelings. Why not insist they let you go into other areas? If you would don the necessary protective gear if needed, but you really want to see everything? I mean, you're a princess. You can order them to." Celestia sighed. "I could do that, but how does it reflect on me if I order them around and then find out everything is fine? At best I'll look paranoid, and at worst, tyrannical. That's not the kind of impression I want to make. It could shatter their trust in me." "I see. Well, you've always been really good at reading ponies. If you feel like they're hiding something, they may be. I can look around for you." "Thank you. But be careful." Celestia hesitated, looking towards the door, then leaned in and said, "There's a reporter from Canterlot that asked them a few too many questions, tried a little too hard to get into the restricted areas. They died in a house fire a few days later." Twilight swallowed. "Oh, surely that's just a coincidence?" "Maybe, but maybe not," Celestia paced. "They have their own police force, their own doctors and lawyers. They're a powerful company. Please, be careful while you're out there." "Of course! I'll see if they're up to anything illegal. You can count on me." "Thank you. And good luck." Celestia watched her head for the door and said, "One last thing." Twilight glanced back. "Don't let them recognize you." Twilight nodded. "Got it. I'll get back to you with everything I learn. See you soon." She left, and Celestia sank into her throne, sighing. "I just hope my suspicions aren't correct." Twilight wasn't going to check out the center yet, though. She was going to wait until night, when it'll be easier to hide. Until then, she was going to research their latest discoveries and see if she could find anything questionable. She collected various old newspapers and magazines, and the latest scientific journals. She cut out everything relating to the company and organized it by date, reading through. The company rose to fame rather quickly, but that wasn't unheard of. They quietly worked on pharmaceutical production until their small research department made a sudden breakthrough that effectively doubled the chances of survival for late-stage cancer patients. After that, they poured more resources into research and shifted their focus to finding cures for all of the chronic illnesses that plagued the world. They've made great progress in both scientific and magical fields, providing a variety of medicines and spells that could treat illnesses that were once considered a death sentence. Twilight didn't want to think of such a great company as behaving unethically, but if they were, she was going to find out. She pondered over a recent news article. Life Aura often took volunteers to test their experimental procedures. There have been deaths, but each volunteer signed up with the understanding that they may not survive. The ones who recovered helped their company refine their treatments, and once they had enough success, they would pass along the new treatment to hospitals. Twilight understood the necessity of pony test subjects. You could only get so far using mice and pigs. Eventually, they had to test their procedures on ponies who would make sure they would work, as long as the volunteers were willing and weren't being coerced. She picked up another article about a mother who tried to sue the company over her daughter's death. She claimed her daughter was confused, didn't fully know what she was agreeing to, and the risks hadn't been properly explained before she signed. The mother had lost the case. All the details were in the paperwork. Her daughter had signed saying she understood, and there wasn't much more to it. Twilight frowned. It was true, sometimes they recruited ponies who were desperate, perhaps not in their right minds. But at what point did an adult pony's agency end? Who got to decide who was incapable of understanding a waiver and who could? It was a decision only the individual themselves should really be able to make. Even someone who was confused could certainly understand a document telling them they might die, right? The company intentionally targeting the sick certainly sounded bad. But then what would they accomplish by testing on the healthy? Well, she probably wasn't going to learn much more like this. She stood, stretching, and carefully filing everything away in a binder. The sun was setting. She might as well head out now. She left the library and found Spike, telling him she was going for a walk around town. Then she pulled on a hooded coat that covered her wings and headed out. She teleported to Manhattan and pulled the hood up. To passerby, she would look like just another unicorn, though her cutie mark might give her away. She glanced back at it and went into the first clothing store she saw, buying pants. She really didn't care for these, but they would cover her flanks, and that's what mattered. Once better disguised, she headed for the ocean. Manhattan had several huge piers that ships were constantly pulling in and out of, many of which were closed to the public. She chose to walk out into one that was open, squinting into the distance. She could just barely see the island off the coast that the center had been built on. The building only seemed to have a few stories, but she heard that it had underground labs. Its lights gleamed just bright enough to be seen, but if she was just casually looking at the horizon, it would be easy to miss. She trotted back to land. There was a small port that was built solely to ferry employees out to the island. It was her best bet. She approached it slowly, sticking to dark areas and checking her surroundings every so often. A few times she considered just teleporting over, but she didn't like trying to teleport to areas that she hasn't seen in detail. She didn't want to appear in front of a security guard or get stuck in a tree or something. Once close enough to see the guard shack for the port, she stopped to examine the area. A small pier with a few boats and the shack, which was manned by one guard in tactical armor who seemed to be holding a firearm. Twilight couldn't help but tense. Very few ponies used guns. Maybe Celestia was right. Maybe they were up to something illegal. She watched as a few ponies in scrubs walked up to the shack, and the guards sat forward, alert. They showed him ID cards, and he nodded, gesturing for them to go onto one of the boats. Twilight now realized it had already had a driver, who had been dozing in his seat. He sat up now, greeting the passengers and starting the boat. It drove off across the water, and the guard went back to relaxing. So the employees had badges, and from her understanding, guests were only allowed in during the day and left from a different port. Perhaps she could just use an invisibility spell and hop onto the next boat out, or levitate over to the island. Starlight has taught her a lot about self-levitation, and she was confident she'd be able to get across to the center. She watched for more employees, but no more showed up. From her research, she knew that the center had a night shift, but very few ponies worked that shift. That was likely the last stragglers heading in. Levitation it is. She looked around to make sure she wasn't being watched, then closed her eyes and focused, casting an invisibility spell. She opened her eyes, checked herself over, and nodded. Now for the difficult part. She lifted herself with her magic. It was still strange floating without using her wings, but she's practiced this enough to be confident with it. She flew over the water, and soon she was over the boat. She followed them in, considering whether or not she wanted to disguise herself to look like one of them. She could swipe one of those badges, maybe. But she would need to change her own appearance. She was far too recognizable. Twilight decided to stay invisible and explore that way. She flew past the boat, going to the dock and landing gently. She looked around, checking where all the guards were. Then she hurried up the road toward the building. It was surrounded by a high fence, and judging from the wires going along it, it was electrified. The road head to a reinforced gate with a guard shack right outside it, manned by a single stallion. The road was lined with bushes and flowers, and there was a sign boasting a large logo of a leaf surrounded by a halo of light, with Life Aura Center written under it. She decided to stop near the guard shack, waiting for the employees to show up so she could follow them in. She was waiting for a while. That boat was going slower than she expected. She watched the shack for a while, but the guard was uninteresting, just sitting in his chair reading a magazine. After several minutes, she went back toward the water to watch for the employees. They were nowhere to be found. Twilight stared. They should be right there. She could see the dock they left from. Where was the boat? She levitated back up, going around for them. She finally saw them going around the side of the island, disappearing into a tunnel she hadn't paid attention to. Twilight flew down to it, but a grate was swung shut before she could get to it. She stopped, hovering there as she examined it. So the employees came through here. Was the gate a decoy then? Or perhaps it was just for visitors. She went back to the fence. She could fly over it, but she got the feeling it was protected against that. Time to test it. She grabbed a rock and threw it. It got partway over, then slammed into an invisible force field and bounced off. Okay then, she wasn't flying in. Teleporting, maybe? She tried to teleport the rock just past the fence. It disappeared, but instead of reappearing on the road inside the fence, the rock just reappeared shooting toward her. She narrowly dodged it and gave the building a much more interested look. They had anti-teleportation magic in place too. They really didn't want anyone sneaking in. Maintaining this invisibility spell was starting to tire her out. She needed to get in, fast. She examined the guard station. Perhaps if she distracted the guard, she could hit the button to open the gate. Or she could just be more direct and pull him out, hold him a safe distance away, and then hit the button. But that would probably be reported the moment she set them down. No, a distraction would be better. Twilight retrieved the trusty rock and bounced it off the station. The guard sat up, staring outside. "Is somebody there?" he asked. Twilight looked around, then rustled one of the bushes with her magic. The guard aimed his gun out the window. "Hey, I know you're there! Come out!" Twilight almost laughed. Only a young pony could actually hide in such short bushes. But she got the feeling these guards were trained to not take any chances. The stallion got up and came outside, grumbling with irritation. He clearly didn't think there was anyone there, but had to follow procedure. Twilight hurried past him, going into the guard shack and looking at the panel he had sat in front of. There was a huge red alarm button, and near it were the controls for the gate. She clicked the open button and heard the gate move. She didn't waste any time, sprinting back outside and through the gap. "Ugh, again?" The stallion groaned and turned around, after giving the bushes a few kicks to make sure nothing was hiding. Then he headed back to his post, and Twilight waited to see if he suspected anything. But instead he just closed the gate and grabbed his intercom, saying to someone, "The gate's broken again. Some pony needs to get out of here and fix it. It keeps opening on its own." Well, that was lucky. Apparently the gate has acted up before. She quickly went the rest of the way to the building, stepping out of the way so a couple ponies in vests and hard hats could pass her, going to examine the fence. She began to realize just how high-tech the company was as she approached the door. You needed a key card to get in, and the windows and doors all seemed hooked to alarm systems. She wouldn't be breaking in, and she wasn't going to risk teleporting. She was already lucky they didn't have an anti-invisibility magic spell up. Then again, very few ponies were proficient in that sort of magic. They probably didn't see a need to devote energy to a detection spell for it. Twilight decided to just sit down and wait for the construction workers to come back. She did her best to watch the proceedings through the window in the meantime. Ponies in scrubs and lab coats walked around, going in and out of different rooms, most of them going downstairs, while the first level seemed dedicated to offices. The employees who weren't walking around were simply wearing lanyards with badges and working at desks. Twilight leaned in closer. They all had typewriters, but some were using a much newer sort of technology, consisting of a sort of screen on a box. Were those computers? She thought those were still experimental. Then again, if anywhere had managed to perfect them, it would be a research center like this. Interesting. Twilight really wished she could write some notes, but doing it out here would be too risky. She'll get inside, find a place to hide, and drop her spell, and then take some notes. Then she could keep exploring. One of the construction workers was coming back. She snuck behind him, matching her hoof steps to his as he approached the door. When he unlocked it and went in, she quietly slipped through after him. Okay, time to investigate. Chapter 2. Symbiosis. The first thing Twilight realized was that the floor was tiled, and her hooves clicked loudly on it. She froze, and the pony she had followed inside paused, looking around. Then he rubbed his ear, shrugged, and kept going. Twilight took a breath, then took a cautious step forward. She had to move very slowly to keep quiet, but she managed it. She crossed the room, examining the doors, and finding that they led to different labs, and not offices like she had thought. Allergy and immunology, emergency medicine, diagnostic radiology. That caught her interest. It wasn't anything suspicious, she was just very curious about the field. It always fascinated her that ponies have learned to use radiation to scan for injuries and disease. She quietly opened the door and slipped in. Her entry was unnoticed. Only a few ponies were working here right now, and they seemed focused on various experiments. She walked through the room and stopped to watch as a device was leveled at a mass of tissue sitting on a dish. She realized with mild disgust that it was a pair of lungs, but understood that this kind of research was best done on actual samples. The device's operator pulled a lead shield in front of the dish and got behind it, then pressed a button to activate the machine. A few seconds of humming, then she lowered the shield and went out to check out a screen. Twilight's ears perked when she realized it showed a scan of the lungs separated out into layers, and the employee noticed a dark splotch on it on one of the images and circled it, looking satisfied. Technology capable of taking such clear, detailed scans of organs would definitely benefit Equestria. Twilight was excited to see that machine reach the public. She kept looking around, but nothing here was suspicious or unethical. All the testing was being done on organs or cadavers. She briefly examined a magnetic imaging machine, then headed back out. She checked out some other sections of the building. Emergency medicine was testing new and improved ways to save lives in an emergency, as the name suggested. How to quickly stop bleeding, set bones, and tend to burns and other severe bodily trauma. There were also a couple of doctors writing out updated procedures, complete with graphic depictions, and Twilight decided she wanted to keep her dinner down. She kept exploring. The ponies working at the desks weren't doing anything too interesting, mostly finances and public relations work. She only watched a few of them before moving on. There was so much going on in the center, but nothing stood out as questionable. She wondered just what Celestia had picked up on that made her worry. Twilight took a quick break in a bathroom, hiding out in a stall and lowering the invisibility spell. She sighed and wiped sweat from her brow. Maintaining that took a lot of effort, and it didn't help that she had her body covered. She was so tempted to just get an ID and walk around visible, but so far she hasn't seen any pony dressed like her. She would stand out. She had vastly underestimated what it would take to sneak into this place, let alone actually explore. Though, if she were to get both an ID and a lab coat... Twilight got up, pulling off her clothes and tentatively trying to teleport them home. They disappeared, and she sighed with relief. It seemed you could teleport out of here, you just couldn't teleport in. Now considerably cooler, she turned herself invisible again and walked out. She looked around, then trotted up to the second floor, where the security offices were. There were signs to the office that issued badges, and she headed there. There were hours of operation, and she found out that they were closed. Badge pickup was during the day only. That seemed inconvenient for the night shift employees. She tested the door. Locked. But it didn't require a card. Instead, there were 6 numbered buttons for a passcode lock. Alright then, plan B. She went down the hall to the employee locker rooms. She would borrow some supplies from the day shift. It'll be fine, she'll give everything right back. She found that none of the lockers were actually locked. She supposed they were confident in the security and trustworthiness of their fellow employees. Then, upon opening one, she discovered why they weren't secured. There was very little in it. A lab coat, some goggles and other PPE, and a lanyard with no badge on it. Okay, maybe that pony just didn't bring much to work. She tried the next locker. This one had scrubs, a face mask, and a box of nitrile gloves, along with some main bands and a mirror. Twilight closed it. Finally, she found a locker with a badge stored in it, and she took it, along with the coat. She turned visible and pulled the coat on. It didn't belong to a Pegasus, so there were no wing holes, but that was fine. It was much easier to hide wings than a horn. She pulled her mane and tail into buns and put the lanyard on. She examined the mare on the badge. She had blue fur and a white mane with a streak of gray. Twilight found a mirror and took a deep breath, then began casting her magic. She was glad the mare whose identity she was assuming was a unicorn. She watched her appearance shift, her fur and mane changing color. The last step was arguably the most difficult. Her eyes. She checked the picture again, then changed her eyes to an intense blue. She gave herself a final examination. Okay, your name is Dr. Bluebell, and you work for pathology. Now, what part of that you work for, I'm not sure, but hopefully no pony questions you. She headed out. She was very nervous, but no one gave her a second glance. She passed the pathology department, heading for one of the staircases that led to the basement levels. But just as she was taking the first step, a voice called. Dr. Bell, is that you? Twilight paused, then turned around. Yeah, it's me. The pony approached her, paused, and tilted her head. Are you feeling okay? Your voice is weird. Oh, Twilight coughed against her foreleg and used a hoarse voice as she replied. Just got a little bug. I'm okay. Oh dear. You don't think you got sick from that influenza sample you were studying, do you? I hope not. I used all the standard precautions. Well, the other mare awkwardly shifted and then said, I did see you handing a sample the other day without gloves on. Remember I had to write you up? Twilight sighed internally. Of course she was impersonating a pony who makes dumb mistakes like that. Oh, right. I'm sorry again about that. Yeah, that could be it. Well, be careful and take some cold medicine. By the way, why are you here? You're not scheduled to work tonight. You were moved to days. Oh, well... Twilight hurried to think of a lie. I couldn't sleep. I'm still so used to being awake at night. I just wanted to come here and see if any pony needed my help. Well, I doubt any pony down in the restricted research section needs you. You don't even have clearance to work down there. Why don't you go to talk to public health? They've been looking for input. Something to do with mosquitoes and malaria? I don't know, but go talk to Dr. Buzz. Dr. Buzz, right. I'll go see her. He's a stallion. Seriously, you feeling okay? Fine, Twilight squeaked. She hurried past, toward where she remembered public health being. The mare shook her head and went back into her lab. Twilight slowed and checked that she was gone. Then she turned and went back toward the stairs, trotting down. Restricted research, huh? That sounded promising. Of course, it could be simply just be military research, or something a princess asked for. But if there was anything shady happening, it would be down there. She noticed there were cameras on the walls. She looked at them out of the corner of her eye, but tried not to stare. That was cutting edge, especially if they were transmitting live to somewhere. Did they develop that technology themselves, or did they get it from somewhere? And if the latter, who provided it? Twilight decided to put the cameras out of mind and watch her surroundings. It was very quiet down here. There were several hallways and doors with hardly any labels. She wasn't sure where to start. She decided to just pick at random. She was just starting to open one of the translucent glass doors when a stern voice called, Doctor! Twilight tensed and turned around, seeing a stallion in a suit marching toward her. She straightened. Yes, sir? I don't know what you're doing, but I need you to come with me immediately. Twilight recognized him as Blazing Aura, the unicorn who spearheaded the Life Aura Center as the leading research center it was today. Several possibilities went through her head. Did he recognize her as an intruder? Did she act suspicious upstairs? Was this place so restricted she was in trouble just for coming down here? Yes, sir, she replied. It's okay, she told herself. If things went sideways, she knew she could teleport out. She followed him down the hall, and he said, I was just running to get some pony. We need a doctor immediately. One of our patients is going into cardiac arrest, and our usual doctor is upstairs in a meeting. and none of my scientists know how to handle this. Twilight's blood ran cold. She didn't know how to handle that either. Sir, should we call for additional help? I can once you get working on him, but if he doesn't get immediate medical attention, he will die. Twilight's breathing grew shallow. She tried to scrape together what she knew about cardiac arrest, but there was very little. Stabilize their heart rate, keep the heart beating. A well-timed electrical shock could do it, unless the heart had already stopped. Then she'd just be zapping meat, as horrible as that was to say. She did know CPR, though, so she hoped the patient's heart was still beating, so she could at least do that. You don't have clearance for down here, so I'll need to up your clearance once this is done, Blazing said. But hey, possible promotion. Well, at least Bluebell might get something out of this. Blazing shoved open a set of doors, and Twilight was stunned as they entered a huge lab ringed by glass cells, all of which contained ponies, many of whom looked sickly and pained. But she didn't have time to look too closely, because then they were approaching one of the cells, and the door was flung open. Here, this is Rockbreak, Blazing said, pushing Twilight in. Save him, he's too valuable to lose. She looked back, but the door was closed and locked behind her. She stared, wondering why she was being locked in, then turned and got down next to the stallion. Sir? She asked him, rummaging through her pockets before finding gloves and pulling them on. Sir, are you all right? He was laying on his side, breathing hard with a crazed look in his eyes. He was clutching his chest. It's in here! It's killing me! He gasped. Okay, just remain calm. Twilight tentatively felt his chest and found that his heart was thrumming to a very offbeat tempo. His breathing ragged. She rolled him onto his back and began compressions, trying to get his heart's rhythm back to normal. Get away! It'll kill you! Get! Rock abruptly passed out. Sir? Rock! I'm losing him! Twilight shouted. She kept up the compressions, then sat back, horns sparking as she prepared to shock him. She might not know how to do this properly, but he was already dying, so she had to try. She made sure she was clear of his body, then fired a bolt of electricity into his chest. He jolted, but remained unconscious, and she kept going, tears welling up in her eyes as she tried to force his heart to keep beating. This isn't what she wanted, she just wanted to look around, and now she was struggling to save a life and nothing was helping. What was with this place? Why wouldn't they have more doctors assigned to work down here? She heard Blazing talk to the scientists around him, and glanced back to see most of them disperse, but one. She looked back at the dying stallion, finally noticing how weak and emaciated he was. He was an earth pony, but all his muscles seemed to have been eaten away, leaving his skin sagging off his bones. What have they been doing to him? Or did he come in this way? She took a breath and prepared her magic for another shock. Clear! Then a stream of black goo erupted from Rock's forehead and slammed into hers, covering her horn, and a deep voice roared, No more! The substance completely blocked her magic. She reeled back with a surprised shout, and something black and slimy emerged from the stallion, rolling in and shifting in an unnerving, alien way. Twilight tried to back away, but it caught all her limbs and pulled itself against her, stretching itself across her body. No! Get back! She shouted, struggling. But as suddenly as it appeared, it seemed to fade away, leaving only black crawling across her before that too disappeared. Her skin itched for a few moments, but the sensation soon stopped. Breathing hard, she felt her face. There was nothing there. What was that? Was the panic making her see things? But there was that voice, and the thing that grabbed her. The stallion gave a final gasp and went limp. When Twilight felt his neck, she couldn't find a pulse, nor was he breathing. No, he's... She sat back, chest aching. He's gone. She looked through the glass, standing. I'm sorry. I couldn't save him. Oh, no matter, Blazing said, while the scientist next to him took notes. He gave her a strange look. You'll do just fine in his place. What? Blazing looked at something on the wall next to her cell. Vitals are normal, heart rate nominal. Oxygen intake is down, though. Keep an eye on that.
Who needs oxygen?
Twilight whipped her head around. Who said that? Blazing just lifted a brow. I'm the only one here talking, Miss Atom. Please note confusion in the subject and possible auditory hallucinations. Like many of our subjects, Miss Atom said, writing that down. Twilight banged on the glass. Let me out of here! I'm afraid I can't do that, Blazing replied. You've become a valuable research subject. Far more valuable than you sniffing petri dishes or whatever you put up in pathology. Blazing kept reading the wall, and Twilight assumed there was some kind of monitor there. I'm glad I found you. Truth is, I have doctors here who could have perhaps saved Rock, but I didn't want to sacrifice them. They're all very hard workers. He was quiet for a bit, then said, This is odd. We took your DNA when you started working here, but this is failing to identify you. Twilight swallowed. Oh, that's weird. It's almost as if... You aren't Bluebell. You're an imposter. Blazing's horn glowed, and he gestured to a couple of guards, who immediately ran to his side. Adam, open the door. But, sir, the symbiote... I won't want to leave her. She matched with it far better than Rock did. Open the door. Adam didn't argue, opening the door while the guards aimed their guns. Twilight's legs shook with fear, and as soon as the door was open, Blazing hit her with a spell. Her fur colors began changing back. No! She cast a counterspell to keep the disguise up, but then the guards stabbed at her with the barrels of their guns, making her lose her concentration. She closed her eyes tight and blasted them backward, and they went flying, crashing into tables and knocking lab equipment over. Twilight struggled out of the cell, tossing off her coat and lanyard and making sure she was still disguised. Can't let them change me back. They can't see my face.
Why didn't you say so?
Twilight gasped as a viscous black fluid flowed across her entire body, coating her and completely obscuring her appearance. Her wings flew open, slime dripping from them.
Now this is more like it.
Twilight had no idea what was going on, what that voice was, or why she was suddenly coated in this strange substance. But she did feel more powerful than ever before, and the fear melted away, replaced with a smug confidence. She charged across the room, her legs seeming to move on their own, and she plowed into one of the guards. He tried to lift his gun, but she grabbed it in jaws that suddenly felt much bigger and stronger than before. She ripped the gun away, and as she opened her mouth wide, the other screamed. Next thing she knew, she had bitten down on his entire head and pulled it off with a sharp, twisting motion. Her teeth crunched through his skull, blood and brain matter flooding her mouth. It tasted both disgusting and delicious, and she yanked herself away, feeling like she was going to vomit. What am I doing? She demanded of herself, wondering where that sick hunger had come from.
Fuel!
That deep voice yelled, and she finally realized it was in her head. She remembered what Blazing had said. Something had matched with her, something the scientists had called a symbiote. As in, something that formed a symbiotic relationship with a host.
That's it, sweetheart. Now let me get us out of here.
They moved, tossing the guard's body aside. They turned to roar at the other guard, who began shooting at them. Twilight flinched, but then she realized the bullets were bouncing right off, and she didn't even feel pain. Her body moved, crossing the room in an instant and knocking the guard out cold with his own weapon. Vicious claws grew from her hooves, and she sank them into his neck, lifting him and opening her mouth wide. Then she stopped, growling, "No! Don't eat him!"
But why?
A deep voice whined from low in her throat. "He's just doing his job! Don't hurt him!"
These ponies go far beyond just being security guards. I've watched them beat the patients here, kick them around, humiliate them, abuse them. They do not deserve our pity.
Twilight swallowed, but firmly said, "Leave him." The being sharing her body groaned but dropped the guard. Twilight turned. "Now where's Blazing?" She got her answer when high-pitched alarms blared around them.
Sounding the alarm,
The voice replied back in her head, sounding pained.
we need to get out.
"But I need to find out what's going on here. This is so much bigger than..."
Out!
Their wings opened, and they were suddenly in the air, slamming through the ceilings as if it was tissue paper. They landed on the first floor, their hooves scrambling against the floor as they ran through the building. There were dozens of guards waiting for them, and Twilight began preparing to teleport out, but the voice said,
"It won't work. They would have cast a barrier spell by now. No teleporting in or out."
Twilight stopped the spell. "So how do we..."
"We fight our way out."
Before she could argue, they were being shot at, and her body moved faster than she ever thought possible. Her wings flapped and launched her straight up. Black appendages shot out from her sides, latching onto the walls and swinging them through the room, so quick that no one could land a hit. Then they flew back down, back legs first, and slamming right through the line of guards. They landed and began kicking out, their legs moving so hard and fast they sent their victims flying. They never stopped moving, leaping from pony to pony, snarling as they punched and threw them. Nothing the others did seemed to even hurt. It was just a rush of adrenaline as Twilight cooperated with the strange being to take down every single guard. Next thing she knew, she was standing near the door, panting, with a room of unconscious ponies in front of her. She realized she was much taller than usual, and when she looked at herself in the glass, she was shocked to see that her entire body had grown huge and muscular. The black liquid seemed almost solid now, and there were hideous white eyes over her own.
"Hideous!"
Twilight opened her mouth. It was filled with sharp teeth, and a long tongue lolled out of it. She shuddered and slammed through the glass, running as fast as she could to get away. And even louder alarms sounded from the building, and she winced, finally feeling pain.
"Here! This way!"
Their wings opened and they took off. More guards poured out of the building, chasing them, the Pegasi taking to the air and aiming their weapons. But before any of them could catch up, Twilight was off the island and diving into the water, swimming so fast and deep their pursuers lost track of them. They resurfaced miles away, jumping onto the shore a good distance south of Manhattan. Twilight gasped for breath as she dragged herself through the sand, the goo seeming to sink back into her body. She hadn't breathed once while underwater, but now she couldn't seem to get enough air. What the hell was that?" she gasped.
"I didn't think you ponies knew how to swear."
She pushed herself up, looking herself over. She looked like herself again, her mane and tail and no longer in a bun, but now very messy. "Okay, who are you?" The liquid emerged from her body in strands before forming into a sort of head and twisting around to look at her. It was horrifying, looking just like she did when she caught her reflection earlier, but somehow she wasn't afraid of it.
"I am Venom."
Chapter 3. Discussions. Twilight stared. "Venom?
"Yes."
What are you?" The being seemed to find that amusing.
"We call ourselves the Clintar, but your species has, fittingly, dubbed us symbiotes."
Right, the scientist said something about that. But I'm still not exactly sure what you are. I've never seen or heard of anything like you before.
"You wouldn't have. We're not from this planet."
Twilight needed a moment to take that in. Then she said, "You're an alien?"
"You got it."
The being seemed to circle her, though it remained attached to her body by that thick liquid. Despite its unnerving appearance, those creepy eyes and toothy grin, she still didn't feel threatened. Somehow she could feel its emotions, and it was more curious about her than anything. It looked her over, then came back to look at her face.
"Some of my people landed here months ago. We were a scouting party looking for new worlds to conquer. But we crash-landed, and we were found by Blazing Aura of the Life Aura Center. He trapped us. We can't survive in your atmosphere, and he took advantage of it. We were imprisoned and used as test subjects in that lab, as his scientists tried to determine if we could cure your kind of chronic illnesses."
Twilight stared at it. "You can't survive here? But you seem okay. Actually, you're very strong."
"Because I have a strong host. You. We can survive here with compatible hosts as long as we feed regularly."
"And what do you need to eat exactly?" Twilight asked, though she got the feeling she already knew.
"Meat. All my brethren are dying in here because they feed us pony diets. They refuse to listen to our calls for meat. which contains chemicals we need. So we must turn to eating our hosts, which inevitably kills them, as you saw in Rockbreak.
At Twilight's questioning stare, he explained.
I was eating his heart when you showed up. Maybe a little bit of his brain. Don't blame me for jumping ship.
Twilight began pacing, resisting the urge to gag. So Blazing is using ponies as test subjects for his experiments, and infecting them with your people. And as each of the new ponies die, a new one has to take their place to keep the symbiotes alive.
Yes.
She sighed. I see. So what exactly do you mean when you say you were looking for worlds to conquer?
Exactly how it sounds. Conquer. Take over. Control. Many of my race say this is wrong, but they're fools who waste their time spreading peace, instead of being the great conquerors we were meant to be. So I'm part of a feared team of Clintar who travel the universe in search of new worlds to inhabit. And this one has so many people to take over. It's perfect.
I will never let that happen, Twilight said firmly.
Luckily for you, unless we manage to send for help, you won't be able to do it anyway. But you could free my people. You could help us get our ship back. Listen, Twilight.
Twilight's fur stood on end. How do you know my name?
I'm part of you. I'm in your mind. I know everything about you, Twilight Sparkle, the princess of friendship. How adorable.
He clearly didn't think very highly of such a title. Twilight could feel his disdain.
Think about how you felt when we fought out of that lab. We are powerful together. All of your kind can feel that way. You can be joined with my people. All of my people once we convince them to join our side. And we can give you strength and technology beyond your imagination. We'll become a perfect symbiotic race. We'll have harmony. You like harmony, right?
It almost sounded beautiful. But Twilight shook her head. There will be no doubt be ponies who want nothing to do with that. I won't let you force them into it.
Bah! Whatever.
You know, I didn't expect you to be this... She cast around for the right word.
This what?
I don't know. Honest, I guess? Helpful? Talkative?
I don't get anything from lying to you. We're one now. Being honest benefits us both.
Twilight couldn't argue that. She looked back toward the city and shook herself off, walking away. So you have to eat meat?
Yes, preferably pony meat. Your brains are soft and so full of nutrients.
Not happening. We can't just go around killing ponies.
Not even the bad ones?
Twilight rolled her eyes. It's not up to me to judge who's bad enough to deserve death.
You creatures are so kind and sentimental. It's frustrating. Listen.
The head whipped around in front of her.
Either I eat meat or I eat your liver. And don't even think about trying to get rid of me. We're bonded at the molecular level, and if I don't want to go, I won't.
Twilight groaned, then muttered, I'll eat poultry and fish occasionally. Maybe pork. Will that make you happy? She felt satisfaction from the creature.
Very happy.
The head disappeared, and she shivered as the liquid sank back into her coat. She could still feel the other as a sort of presence in her mind. Cool, but not uncomfortable. She had so much to tell Celestia.
No, you can't tell her.
Why not? It was strange just how used Twilight was already talking to this creature in her mind like this.
If Blazing finds out you know, he will kill you. He's been tormenting us into giving up knowledge to his scientists. He will not let it get out that all of his company's success is due to aliens. Remember when Celestia told you about that reporter that died in the fire? Blazing arranged for that. I heard him talking about it to one of his guards.
Kill me? Twilight laughed aloud at that. I'm an Alicorn princess. I don't know how much you know about us, but it'd be very difficult to just up and murder one of us. I doubt even Blazing Security Force could pull it off. Celestia trusts me. If I tell her what I saw in there, she and the other princesses will be totally ready to blow the lid off the place. We're not going to sit back and let him keep torturing ponies. His company has done great things, sure, but progress on the backs of innocents is no sort of progress I want.
How sweet. But if that's how you feel, then go ahead. Tell Celestia, and hope that word doesn't somehow get back to Blazing. Because if it does, he will take you out first. I say we should just kill him ourselves. Sneak in, track
Twilight shook her head. No, we're getting Celestia's help, and that's final.
Ugh, why did I have to get stuck in such a goody two-host creature like you? Well, be my guest, but if you get your fellow princesses gunned down in cold blood, don't come crying to me.
Twilight rolled her eyes. There was no way that was going to happen. The 3 other princesses of Equestria were powerful and would have no problem with this threat. She just needed to decide exactly how she was going to explain all this to Celestia, and then they would likely need to meet up to plan out their strategy before actually going after Blazing. In the meantime, she was going to try to focus on her normal duties, and get used to Venom. If she really wouldn't be able to get rid of him, she would learn to handle him. At least he seemed willing to let her control their body now. He just rode shotgun, watching everything calmly through her eyes. Twilight really hoped the Center didn't manage to track that fiasco down to her. They would no doubt be wanting their symbiote back.
If they send anyone after us, we'll eat them,
Venom said casually. She sighed and closed her eyes, teleporting back home. Venom took great interest in her castle, and she ended up spending several minutes just walking around and letting him take a look at everything. While he could just access her memories of the layout, he wanted to see it all for himself. She was still hesitant about this, but she was already growing used to his presence. At least there were benefits. They lingered in the kitchen for a while, Twilight's stomach growling loudly when she opened the refrigerator. All of a sudden, she felt like she was starving, and she grabbed for a bag of whole carrots, but Venom ended up taking over control of her forelegs and just shoving them back in.
Meat! Meat!
I don't have meat.
Then go buy meat! A few omnivores live here now, right? And the supermarket now carries meat. Like chicken. Go buy some!
They're closed by now.
Gah! Then first thing tomorrow we go shopping!
Twilight rolled her eyes and took out a carrot, chomping on it to try and quell the hunger anyway. She went over to her cabinets, searching through them before picking up a bag of chocolates and going to sit down with them, needing something sweet after today's ordeal. Once she finished the carrot, she picked out a chocolate and popped it in her mouth. There was an immediate, fascinated reaction from Venom.
Oh, that's good. Chocolate. It's strangely satisfying.
Yeah, chocolate usually has that kind of effect on people.
No, I mean, I'm not as hungry now. Strange. Perhaps this could be a substitute for meat. Though I still like the taste of meat, especially ponies.
Twilight chose not to acknowledge that last statement. Did they let you have chocolate at the Center?
No. They fed us the healthiest diets they could, perfectly optimized, they claimed. Yet their brilliant scientists failed to realize we need protein, and a particular chemical you call phenylethylamine. None of those things were in all that plant garbage, though I'm starting to suspect this chocolate has it. Anyway, they gave us none of it. But you sense it, don't you? You can sense how much I need it.
I have to admit, you're making me want meat too. I could only really tolerate certain fish before, but chicken is starting to sound good right about now. She felt a kind of chuckle deep in her chest.
Perhaps if you gave some of my favorite foods a try, you'll learn to love them. And I may learn to love your favorite foods as well.
That was agreeable. Twilight went back to eating the chocolate, and Venom's eagerness may have gotten to her because she had her face shoved all the way inside the bag when Spike walked in. Oh, Twilight, just popping in for a snack. Didn't expect Spike stopped staring at her. Twilight stared back, the bag still stuck on the end of her muzzle. He slowly backed out. Never mind. Hope you enjoyed your walk. She dropped the bag when she was gone, licking her lips off with a tongue that was much too long. She quickly shoved it into her mouth. Do you mind not shape-shifting me like that?
Buzzkill.
Twilight stood, throwing away the now empty bag and yawning. She really needed to start drafting that letter to Celestia, but all that fighting had taken a lot out of her. She decided to do it tomorrow and headed up to bed. Venom seemed in agreement that she needed sleep, and her eyes drooped the moment she was under the covers. Still, as much as she wanted to sleep, memories of the Life Aura Center kept flashing through her head. All those miserable ponies in that back underground lab. Rockbreak dying under her hooves. The guards trying their best to kill her. Until she fought back. She killed one of them. She shook slightly, gathering the blankets closer to her chest and wringing them anxiously. At least one pony died as a direct result of her snooping around. Guilt flooded her. She never wanted things to go that far. Why didn't she just turn around the minute she saw how heavily guarded the facility was?
If you hadn't been there, some other pony would have taken to try and save Rockbreak. Their efforts would have been in vain, and I would have bonded with them instead of you. They may not have been compatible. I may have died in their body. You were strong enough to allow me to fight our way out. You saved me from weeks, or perhaps months of being tortured. But I wouldn't waste time worrying about what-ifs. What happened, happened. Now we must look forward.
Twilight swallowed, relaxing slightly. Right, look forward. I'll try. I just can't help but think about how I could have done things differently.
Yes, I noticed that about you. You think too much. You analyze everything. Sometimes you just need to go with the flow.
Liquid crawled across her coat, and she started to shiver. But then it began to feel strangely warm, and she found herself relaxing into it like it was a blanket. Go with the flow. Hard to do that when I killed some pony, she lifted a hoof to her mouth, ate him. And the worst part is, he actually tasted
good. Yes, he did, didn't he? That satisfying crunch, followed by rich, soft brain matter.
Twilight's gut churned, and Venom huffed.
But I see your kind frowns on that sort of behavior. You feel bad because society tells you to feel bad. I say you should stop thinking about it. Move on. One less pony to torment the Life Order Center's victims, and more fuel in our tank.
She was just too tired to keep talking about it tonight. She needed to mull things over. Good night, she said out loud. She sensed Venom's relief at no longer needing to talk to her. He seemed annoyed at all the explaining she had made him do, but there was no real hostility towards her. In fact, it almost felt like he was embracing her as she drifted off, and the last thing she was aware of was Venom whispering back, as if in her ear.
Good night.
Chapter 4. Shopping. When Twilight woke up, she felt more well-rested than she has in weeks. She couldn't recall what she had dreamed about, but that was fine. She was so warm and comfortable, and when she opened her eyes, the morning sunlight seemed far too bright. She winced and closed them, trying to sink into that heat surrounding her. It was the weekend. School wasn't open today. She could sleep in.
Excellent idea, Princess.
Her eyes flew open, and she sat upright. Venom. The alien extended a head out of her neck so he could look her in the eye.
Yes?
He asked, sharp teeth glinting in his wide maw, a few strings of saliva dripping out. She looked herself over and realized why she felt so warm. His skin had completely coated hers. It was a sort of connection that was so deep and intimate it made her blush. She cleared her throat and said, So, I guess all that crazy stuff did happen last night. I'm bonded with an alien parasite.
Parasite!
He demanded. Their hide twitched and she felt him bristle with anger.
Parasites take and give nothing in return. I am a perfect symbiote in a mutualistic bond with you. You breathe and allow me to survive in this atmosphere, and in turn, I share my strength with you. You eat to fuel me, I repay you with the ability to fight and move like never before. We make each other better. If I was a parasite, trust me, you would not be breathing right now.
Twilight was taken aback, but didn't let him intimidate her, getting in his face. Okay, so we are in a mutualistic relationship, not a parasitic one, whatever. This is still really freaky and gross, and I don't know how Celestia is going to react to the truth about the Life Aura Center, not to mention what happened to me and... Ugh! She turned and threw herself face first into a pillow. She felt surprise radiate through their connection. She tried to pry into his thoughts, but he masked them from her, and she was briefly satisfied that she had made him speechless. He watched her silently for a few seconds, and she kept her face against the pillow. Then she felt a gentle stroking between her wings. Looking over, she saw Venom resting his chin on the pillow next to her, having formed a neck and shoulders to go with his head, and he was petting her with a human-like hand. It was surprisingly cute, and she resisted the urge to giggle. He was making it really hard to remember he was a vicious space alien.
I'm only vicious toward our enemies.
I noticed. Twilight let him coax her into sitting up, curiously examining his current form. His liquid had uncovered her body, and his usually liquid form had become more solid as he rested next to her, muscular and large, though it was only composed of a torso and everything above that point. The rest just flowed back into that strange biomass and bonded seamlessly to her. He looked her over too, apparently interested to see her in the sunlight, and even lifted one of her hooves to look at closely, comparing it to his hand. Twilight was already thinking of how she was going to explain the differences between ponies and these aliens to Celestia. They were so unlike anything else in Equestria. This could be a fascinating field of study.
Your thoughts are so loud!
Venom complained. She stared. My thoughts?
We share the same mindscape.
He gave her skull an unnecessarily hard tap, though at the same time it didn't really hurt.
You're just in there shouting everything that goes through your brain to the void. I hear all of it.
So, how do I keep you from hearing everything?
Don't overthink it. Someone pulled it off yesterday. If you want me to hear, then intend for me to hear. If you don't, keep it private. I can't explain much simpler.
Twilight's brows furrowed, but she gave it a try, quietly trying to sing one of Pinky's cupcakes recipes to herself without wanting him to hear. Judging from the lack of response from Venom, he didn't catch it, though he did smirk at how she bobbed her head slightly to the tune. Then her thoughts wandered again. So if you had to write a... Oh, sorry. Venom looked more exasperated than angry.
Look, Fluffface, stop thinking about how to talk to Celestia. Write later. Go do something else to distract yourself. Then we'll get to it when we're ready. But it does need to happen soon. I need to free all the Clintars so we can go home. They've suffered long enough.
Go home, huh? Why, so you can bring back enough of your kind to take over every sapient being in the world?
That would be ideal, yes.
What if I don't let you?
Let me?
He laughed.
You think you could stop me? I'm part of you. In essence, I am you. I can move without your permission.
To demonstrate, he opened and closed their wings. Twilight tried to stop them from moving. It was a struggle as she felt his will trying to overpower hers. After a few moments, she groaned and gave up, but so did he, instead just blanketing himself around her body.
Your will is strong, which means anything we do, we must cooperate on. I could take a weaker-minded host, but you've got a fighter to you I quite enjoy. Plus, it would be a shame to lose this body.
He posed a bit as he examined their body more.
It's really quite impressive. An alicorn. The things I could do.
Yes, well, if you want to move to some pony else, go for it. You won't hurt my feelings.
Oh? Would you be okay with that?
Venom sprouted his face back out so he could stick it in hers. She was so used to it by now she didn't even flinch.
Would you truly allow another pony to feel the shock and horror you did when we bonded? Allow them to have their mind and body controlled into doing my bidding? Risk them not being a match for me, resulting in me eating away their organs and flesh as I struggle not to die? Is that really what you want, Princess of Friendship?
Twilight hesitated. Well, no. I don't want any pony being harmed.
And speaking of being harmed, even if my new host were to be compatible, what if we get discovered for what we are by Blazing and his team? Taken back into that lab, locked up, experimented on, starving to death. You want that?
No!
Of course not. But you're powerful and clever. We won't be captured if we stay together.
Venom ran his head from her back up along her neck. Twilight tensed when his claws elongated, but didn't try to move away. He touched her face, stroking through her cheek fur. He was surprisingly gentle about it.
Besides, I've already taken a liking to you.
She wasn't sure what to make of the emotions he was projecting through their mental link, so she elected to just ignore them and instead focus on the conversation. Flattery will get you nowhere. I'm a princess of Equestria, and I will not let any harm come to it. So while I will let you stay with me, I cannot and will not allow your species to take over. That is final.
So you're leaving them to suffer?
We'll rescue them. Get them into willing hosts. You can become part of our society, but I can't allow your entire species to come here. I know most of them are peaceful, but since there are those who just want to conquer other worlds, I can't. It's just too dangerous.
My brethren in the lab would accept hosts, but many of them are very loyal to our team. They will want to bring others like us here. Stopping them from doing so will be difficult.
We'll figure something out. Twilight burrowed under their covers.
You'll figure it out under here?
She sighed. I'm going back to sleep.
Again? You already slept for 8 hours.
Tired.
You're not tired, you're hungry. Let's go shopping.
Can I do it later?
You promised you'd buy chicken.
Right. Twilight finally rolled out of bed, going over to the mirror and looking herself over. Venom had vanished back into her, and she leaned in close, trying to find any hint that was sharing her body with an alien. But there was nothing.
Beautiful, aren't we? We can look like this, and we can look like this.
They bulked up, the dark goo covering them in an instant, and Twilight turned a few ways to stare at just how muscular her legs had become. She looked very unsettling with her body concealed like this. She couldn't even recognize herself. Her mane and tail had become a flowing mass of liquid. Her eyes were sharp and milky white, and her smile was far too wide. Her wings and horn were still visible, but if she saw a creature like this without knowing what it was, she wouldn't connect it to any of the Alicorn princesses at all. She would just see it as a grotesque monster.
Oh, so now I'm grotesque?
No, I mean, you, or I guess we. Twilight spun in a circle, looking at herself from all angles. We look unstoppable. You make me look strange, there's no doubt about it, but I like it. Nobody could recognize me like this. I could really do anything. I could be a vigilante, be a superhero almost.
Don't get ahead of yourself. How many superheroes do you know like eating brains?
Well, there's a first for everything, right? But seriously, we could do amazing things together.
Yes, we could. I'm glad you recognize it. I feel the yearning for power inside you. You've been satisfied with your progress as an Alicorn, but you've always wanted more. I can give you more. We'll improve together. We'll get stronger, and soon nothing will stand in our way.
Twilight turned away from the mirror, silently asking him to return them to normal, which he did. Well, I think first I want to get a baseline for our current power.
Fantastic! But if you expect me to perform my best, you need to get me that breakfast you promised.
You're still on about
1 chicken, preferably raw, but I'll cook it for your sake. Then you can do all the tests you want on me, and you by extension.
Okay, breakfast it is. But you better blow me away when I test you.
Challenge accepted.
Going to the store was an adventure. Venom seemed interested in trying anything and everything, including products that weren't even food. She had to carefully explain to him why she couldn't drink laundry detergent, no matter how nice it smelled. He also dragged her through the coffee aisle, pretty much plastering her face against one of the coffee bean dispensers and inhaling deeply. She pulled back, but not before a filly walking by with her mother gave her a confused look. Just trying to decide what coffee to switch to, Twilight said, laughing nervously. The two kept going, and she heard the filly say, "The princess really loves coffee, just like Daddy." Okay, that was adorable. Twilight quickly told Venom that the coffee beans didn't exactly taste good in their current state, and he told her to buy some and brew them then. She sighed, filled a bag with her favorite brand, and tossed it in her cart. It's a good thing she needed to go shopping anyway, she supposed. Then they were hurrying to the nearest tiny meat department, where a griffin worked. He seemed surprised to meet her. "Ma'am, just so you know, this is all actual meat. But we have a vegetarian line down the way that tastes like the real thing." "Oh, I know. I want real meat." "You do?" "Mm-hmm." She browsed the selection and felt Venom's hunger. She licked her lips when she got to the pile of whole chickens bound and ready to be cooked. Don't meet many ponies who eat meat. But all right, what can I get you? She let Venom take over, and he gladly did so. "I'll have 2 of these chickens, a pack of pork chops. Oh, these chicken nuggets would make a delicious snack. And get me those sausages. And this pack of salmon." The Griffin bagged everything for them, weighing the bags and putting price labels on them. They put everything carefully in their cart, thanked him, and headed for the front. He scratched his head as he watched them go. That princess is weirder than I thought. I thought we were just getting chicken, Twilight thought as she stalked through toward the checkout line.
We were, but I figured we should stock up.
She greeted the cashier and began unloading her cart. The others scanned through with little comment, though raised an eyebrow at the sight of all the meat, looking up at Twilight. I got curious, she replied nervously. He shrugged and went back to scanning. Twilight paid and got out of there as quickly as she could, teleporting back home with her bags. She went right to the kitchen, horn glowing and everything floating into the air. She put it all away, though left one of the chickens out. I don't know how to prepare this.
Then allow me.
Venom took control, and she just mentally took a back seat, letting him trot around the kitchen collecting what he needed. They pulled the strings off the chicken and plopped it into a tray. The oven was set to preheat, and Venom went through the spices, sniffing before settling on a few he liked. He found a brush and used it to wipe just the smallest amount of water along the meat, then sprinkled on the spices.
It's almost good enough to eat now, but I don't want your body to reject it.
Thanks. They kept preparing the chicken, getting it nice and spiced, arranging some broccoli and carrots artfully around it. And once the oven dinged, they put the pan in and closed the door. Venom was impatient, taking to pacing the room, until Twilight reminded him that they had bought more chocolate. He decided to munch on a caramel-filled piece, but wanted to save his appetite for the chicken. The scent of it soon filled the air, and Venom's hunger made their mouths salivate. The smell soon attracted Spike, who had apparently slept in. He rubbed his eyes and stared into the kitchen. "Are you making chicken?" he asked. "Yeah," they replied. "Since when do you eat meat?" "Since, I was curious. I mean, I know quite a few griffins and hippogriffs now and other omnivores. I wanted to try foods they like." "Huh. Well, okay, but don't eat too much. You wouldn't want to get sick." He went to open a cabinet, taking out a stash of sapphires and tossing one into his mouth. "You want some?" Twilight asked. "Sure, it smells really good." Spike hung out while they waited for the food to finish, and they chatted about their plans for the weekend. Then Spike settled into reading a comic.
He's very nice for a dragon.
He was raised by ponies, but other dragons are learning to be nicer too, thanks to my school.
Cute. Good luck with that.
Once the chicken was done, Twilight used magic to pull the hot tray out of the oven and set it on the stove. She carefully cut a leg from it, which Spike claimed. She had to resist the urge to just shovel the entire chicken into her mouth. She instead cut some slices out and scooped some of the vegetables onto her plate, then went to sit down. She spent a few moments just looking at the food in front of her. Meat. She was really going to eat meat. She's never had chicken before. She sniffed it.
Come on, you've been smelling it this whole time. Let's eat.
Before she could protest, her hooves were moving, grabbing a slice and tossing it into her mouth. Spike stared at her, and she silently yelled at Venom, "Fork! We eat with a fork, not our hooves!"
Whatever you say.
Their horn lit up, and they picked up the fork, spearing a piece and lifting it that way. "Are you all right?" Spike asked. "You're acting kind of funny." "Oh, you know," Twilight laughed nervously. "Totally fine." "If you say so. But if you want to talk, I'm here." He slid the chicken leg into his mouth, gnawing off the rest of the meat as he left the room.
Everyone around here really trusts you. None of them are really questioning your odd behavior.
I haven't done anything too weird yet. They might just think I'm having an off day. It happens.
This must be that love and tolerance I've heard so much about.
Twilight focused more on how the chicken tasted. The texture was strange, the flavor even more so. It was different from anything else she's ever had, and she wasn't sure how she felt about it. But it wasn't bad. Her stomach coiled with brief nausea at the thought of what she was eating, but she pushed past it. Better this than brains, right?
Brains are so good, though. You really should try it again. It's an acquired taste.
No thanks. She felt Venom's dismay, but he was content with this meal. They brought the entire pan over to the table. Now that they were alone, they ate more messily, diving in face first and tearing soft strips of meat away from the bone. Twilight was mildly disgusted, but somehow it was very easy to just let Venom take over and follow his instincts. This really wasn't so bad. In fact, it was starting to taste pretty good. The meat was so tender and juicy, rich in flavor, and she thanked the other for talking her into eating it.
See? delicious. You herbivores have been missing out. We'll prepare all sorts of meats. You'll love them all, just wait and see. Maybe I can even get you to let me eat this stuff raw.
Don't hold your breath. A few seconds later, and Venom was extending their jaw and chomping down on the rest of the chicken, using their tongue to slurp up the juices and draw the body all the way into their mouth. Twilight shuddered as they crunched through bones, but they had little trouble swallowing, and she began to wonder just how much the symbiosis had changed her body.
Quite a lot, I imagine,
Venom replied, and they wiped their mouth off before munching on the vegetables still in the tray. Changed my body, changed my taste. This is the last thing I expected when I snuck into that center, but I guess it isn't too bad.
Of course not. I mean, you could have been killed.
Yeah. When they finished off everything in the pan, they took it over to the sink to rinse out. Then they headed to the castle gym, so Twilight could test just how strong Venom has made her. He stretched a couple arms out of her, cracking his knuckles.
Let's do this.